Committee will come to order. Appreciate your patience as we took a recess for the votes that were on the floor, the swearing in of a new member, a gentleman from Illinois. But now we're pleased to recognize, as we continue with the hearing, Mr. Duncan from Tennessee.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I don't have any questions, but I do want to make a few statements for the record. And let me say, first of all, that I almost never disagree with my chairman, and Ranking Member Cummings is one of the members here that I respect the most. But I personally think this Federal Air Marshal Service is probably the least, or certainly one of the least needed organizations in our entire federal government. And this is no criticism of Director Allison. He's been assigned or given a job, and it's his duty to do the best that he can. And I may have been the first or one of the first to question the need for this organization, but many people have followed that, have done that in the past few years. Graham Slattery wrote in the Harvard Political Review, he said, a third, and for our purposes, final example would be, of course, the Federal Air Marshal Service, not the one of Hollywood's imagination, but the real one, which has come to be a symbol of everything that's wrong with the DHS, the agency in which 4,000 bored cops fly around the country first class, committing more crimes than they stop, and waiting to be among the 0.1% of agents making one of those rare, ephemeral $200 million arrests. And what he's referring to, there was a USA Today article a few years ago that said that there were more air marshals being arrested than arrests by air marshals. There were a few years there where they averaged 4 arrests a year. And this is for an agency that was getting over $800 million a year. And in fact, in the last 10 years, they've gotten almost $9 billion total. Then there was a book written by John Miller, a professor at Ohio State, and along with Mark Stewart, an Australian statistical engineer, who wrote a book called Overblown: How Politicians and the Terrorism Industry Inflate National Security Threats and Why We Believe Them. One of the key findings of this book was that these two professors could not find any internal discussions, public reports, government personnel, or sources of any kind that could explain how the DHS could justify the spending on the Federal Air Marshal Service. And they said because the agency so totally fails a cost-benefit analysis. And when they wrote, they said since the FAMS costs $1.2 billion per year, which was, I guess that was how much it was at the time they were writing, and its effectiveness is in serious doubt. And they said an alternate policy measure is to double the budget of the FFDO program, the Federal Flight Deck program, and also to increase the spending on the secondary security barriers, the IPSBs. Former Congressman Sonny Callahan, I remember saying years ago, he said, we did everything we really needed to do when we secured the cockpit doors, and of course now we spend billions on the TSA. But these two professors recommended a 75% cut in funding for the Federal Air Marshal Service because it was so ineffective. Then former Senator Tom Coburn wrote in his last report that he made as a senator, he said it's unclear to what extent the Air Marshal Program is reducing risk to aviation security despite the more than $820 million annually that is spent on the program. In addition, he wondered if other enhanced security screening and safety precautions undertaken by the TSA and airlines themselves have made, he said they've made the Air Marshal Service irrelevant. It seems to me, of course, every member of Congress flies here usually about twice a week. And that's what these air marshals do. They fly back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. It's got to be one of the softest, easiest jobs in the federal government, but I think one of the least necessary. And so I just wanted to put those comments on record, Mr. Chairman, and because I think this money, there are so many better things that this money could be, and should be being spent on. Thank you very much.
Thank the gentleman. We'll now recognize the gentlewoman from Illinois, Ms. Duckworth, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Allison, I was troubled by your written testimony because it did little to address ongoing investigations of allegations of workers' comps, fraud, sexual misconduct by the air marshals. I think that this behavior undermines your mission and Americans that the agency serves. Especially disappointed that the scandal involves air marshals from your Chicago office, which is, of course, near one of the world's busiest airports, Chicago O'Hare. My constituents expect and deserve to be served by a dedicated corps of federal air marshals who are 100% committed to safeguarding flights in and out of Chicago. And as other members have rightly noted, these allegations are highly disturbing because they involve federal law enforcement officers. And Congress entrusts these men and women with a badge, a gun, a solemn oath to protect our constituents from terrorist acts. And if the allegations of this egregious behavior and misconduct are proven true, I strongly believe that the 3 Chicago air marshals must be held fully accountable. And I know that you're well on your way to doing so, and one of which have retired. But my concerns extend beyond this particular incident. My fundamental questions about the potential weaknesses is in how the Air Marshal Service recruits, vets, and hires new applicants into the job. This scandal that was disclosed last night comes on the heels of another alleged incident of gross misconduct involving your employees earlier this year, and it's simply unacceptable. And now that there are 2 incidents, I want to make sure that these are highly unusual, isolated incidents and not a weakness in the recruiting program. However, this committee can't replace facts with hope. We have an oversight responsibility to examine whether these scandals are symptoms of a deeper, more comprehensive problem that threatens to undermine their service effectiveness in recruiting, evaluating, and hiring potential air marshals. So, Director Allison, can you briefly describe how Federal Air Marshal Service's recruiting, vetting, and hiring system allowed individuals who are suspected of engaging in incredibly inappropriate misconduct to become Federal Air Marshals in the first place? And include in your answers details on the type of after-action review your team conducted to make such a determination.
Congresswoman, first of all, let me just state my opinion about the activity that we're talking about here today. For law enforcement officers to engage in this conduct, that really contributes to the scourge of human trafficking is reprehensible. These individuals are a disgrace to the profession. They are a disgrace to our organization. I came from a place in the military where you never embarrass yourself or the organization. And this committee has my commitment that I'm going to take a personal interest in making sure these people are shown the door. To your question about hiring, the vast majority of the air marshals were hired in a stand-up right after 9/11. Since then, we've had a couple of other hiring opportunities. I believe one might have been in 2007 or 8, and subsequent, there was one in 2011. That was the last time we've hired. The good news is we're a learning organization. We've gotten better. And our last hiring effort, we actually infused much more scrutiny upon the folks. So I'm not here to say that I'm not blaming on 9/11 the stand-up. That was a challenging time for a lot of people. But as we move forward, and if I get the opportunity to hire, to your point, we're going to put polygraphs in place, which we weren't doing before. They were all vetted. Everybody had a background check, but background checks are snapshots in time. They don't predict future behavior. So I don't know if I can say unequivocally we didn't do a good job of hiring. I think we can do a better job of hiring, to your point.
Will you be doing any type of a formal analysis of the hiring process, perhaps conducting an independent review within your own organization, or perhaps turning to DHS and asking their IG office to do a review for you so that you get a truly independent look at it?
I'm certainly willing to ask the IG, but just let me share with you, in the President's budget for this year, we had made a request, but in that process, we actually worked internally with our Office of Human Capital, our Office of Civil Rights and Liberties. We had a team of people looking at, okay, if we get a chance to hire, what is this going to look like? How are we going to manage this? And what's the best way to move forward? Because we want quality applicants. I would rather not have to deal with bad employees. So I share your concern.
I'm out of time. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes. I want to talk specifically about those that were based in Chicago. This all started because what happened?
Well, Mr. Chairman, as I explained to you last night, I cannot give any details on that.
So that there was
investigation.
a suggestion that there was some fraud involved in a disability claim, correct? Go ahead and leave your mic on, because I'm going to keep asking here.
There was an investigation, and in the conduct of that investigation, they found activity that led to what we're here talking about today,
And
and which is still ongoing, by the way.
what leads you to believe it's ongoing? There was a disability fraud allegation. Is that going to be prosecuted?
I do know that that was referred to the U.S. Attorney's Office.
And what did they tell you?
They told me I should contact the U.S. Attorney's Office.
And did they tell you they're going to prosecute it?
I did not get that, Mr. Chairman. What I got was for details relating to,
This is the concern, is that they're actually not going to prosecute it. What happened? What's the disposition of the other people?
everybody involved in this
How many
scheme.
people?
There were 3.
The other 2 people, what's happened to the other 2?
All of the individuals involved were put on indefinite suspension without pay, and 1 individual has resigned.
When you put them on indefinite suspension without pay, which I think is probably the due course to doing that, what was the time from when you heard about it till you actually were able to do that, put them on suspension?
We were notified sometime around the 2nd or 3rd week of June, and by the middle of July, I believe they were on indefinite suspension.
What was the highest rank of the person implicated?
Most of our line employees are, we have a pay banding system, but equivalent to the GS system, more or less, the 13 level. They weren't supervisors, to your, I get.
They were not supervisors. Did any of these 3 individuals have misconduct in their past record or disciplinary action?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not aware. If it was minor.
Do you think these individuals believe their behavior is condoned? I'm not asking if it was condoned by you. I'm asking if these individuals believe their supervisors would look the other way. Did they believe their supervisors engaged in similar type of behavior, or that the media wasn't involved and so therefore it wouldn't be an issue?
I do not know, Mr. Chairman, but I can just tell you that the majority of our people, when they hear about these things, they're sickened. So for them to, as you stated, assume that it was okay, I think it's a case where they must have thought it was okay, and they must have thought they weren't going to get caught.
Were any of these were 3 men, correct?
Yes, sir.
Were they involved and engaged in sexual misconduct with anybody that was underage?
I'm not aware of that, Mr. Chairman.
Were any of these women, these men engaged with in sexual misconduct, were they any of them foreign nationals?
I'm not aware of that, Mr. Chairman.
Has there been any contact made with the intelligence community to determine if any of these contacts related in a breach of security?
Well, one, I'm not sure there was anybody that was a foreign individual, but, so no, we haven't contacted the intelligence.
And this was not an isolated incident, was it?
Meaning, sir?
That it didn't just happen once,
I'm not aware of the frequency.
but it was more than once.
I suspect you're right.
What you mentioned, we've talked about prevalence of potential alcohol abuse in FAMs. How would you assess the situation, and what specifically are you doing about it?
So, Mr. Chairman, the suggestion that there's alcohol abuse, I'm not aware of that. I will tell you that my 23 months that I spent in the Office of Inspection before I became the FAMS director, and by the way, I had no idea I was coming to be the FAMS director, it didn't take a rocket science to figure out that Mr. Booz was an enabling factor with a lot of off-duty misconduct, domestic violence issues, DUIs. So upon taking the position, the first thing I did was order the orchestration of an alcohol awareness program, which was really founded on two individuals who poured their heart and souls out on this video and talked about how alcohol ruined their lives. They almost died. And so the point of that was to say to the workforce, if you have a problem, come forth, we're going to help you. So I'm on there talking about the mission, our reputation as an organization. The federal air marshals are talking about what alcohol did to them, the fact that they're still productive members of the organization. We have the medical people talking about the assistance that's available to them. And also the personal security chief talks about what can happen if if it's not managed appropriately. So I ordered that to be completed. It was, the product exceeded my expectations, tribute to my staff. Everybody in the organization had received that training by May of this year.
And as I yield back my time, I guess this is one of the things that impresses me about you specifically, about this organization, the management you provided, is taking a proactive stance and taking proactive measures to deal with something that was obviously an issue. It's not simply unique to FAMS. It is an issue that a lot of law enforcement deal with, and I think it was very appropriate that you did that, and I appreciate you doing that. My time's exceeded. I will yield back and now recognize Ms. Lawrence for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Allison and Ms. Book, thank you for being here today. I appreciate you being here. The alleged misconduct of federal air marshals that have been reported in the media, if it is true, is outrageous and unacceptable. I understand that discussing specifics of these allegations could jeopardize ongoing investigations, and we don't want that to happen. But without going into specific investigations, we do have an opportunity, and I really appreciate what I just heard you say, Director Allison. We have the opportunity to discuss positive policy changes that agencies can implement to ensure that serious misconduct is dealt with quickly and fairly. So my question to you today, in addition to the EPA and IG, they were able to identify employee misconduct cases involving pornography for expedited processing. EPA reports that this new procedure is already working. They have taken prompt administrative action in 2 misconduct cases since initiating ongoing communications with the Office of Inspector General. Director Allison, can you let me know, is there a similar process for the Federal Air Marshal Service in which investigators, management, and leadership communicate with the goal of streamlining the disciplinary process?
Sure, Congresswoman. So the good news is we've been doing that probably for about 4 years. And we're a little bit different, and I saw the memo that was provided to me last night by the staff. We're a little bit different organized at EPA. So we do have a DHS-IG, but within TSA, we do have an Office of Inspection where there are criminal investigators that do investigations. And so similarly, what you described is when these investigations are occurring, if the facts and circumstances present themselves and gives us an opportunity to take an administrative action, we will do that. Now, all cases are different. You know, sometimes the U.S. Attorney's Office is involved and you can't share the information, but to your point, we look for opportunities when we can, where we can.
Well, I want to thank you. But I just want to say that the bad apples in any organization tend to get all the media. We recognize that. But we don't want to overlook the way that agencies are streamlining their disciplinary processes without sacrificing the due process rights for federal employees. I do want to say that your leadership, your responsibility of stepping up and addressing this issue, and I understand there's some things you can't speak on, but representing, being a member of Congress and expecting our federal agencies to conduct themselves at a level that would be respective of the taxpayers' investment in their jobs and our expectations of their performance. I expect leadership. I appreciate the fact that you did meet with the chairman and our ranking member. I appreciate that. And I will stay in tune to what happens next.
Thank you, Congresswoman.
Generally, yield. Thank you very much. Just one question. When you met with the chairman and yours truly last night, I wanted the committee to have the benefit of an answer to a question I asked you. The chairman and I have concluded that the Secret Service over the years had developed a certain culture. Some might call it complacency, some mediocrity. I do believe it's getting better, and a lot of it's gotten better because of the things that we've done. But I want you to talk about do you believe that you have a culture problem? Because if it's a culture problem, I mean, you got to dig deep and really kind of almost reconstruct sometimes. But do you see that, or you just see these as more like aberrations?
So, Mr. Ranking Member, what I see is having the benefit of being to every field office. Now, granted, there are some limitations because if I go to an office today, New York, for example, there may be 75 fellow air marshals. If I stay the night, I'll see a different 75. So I can't get to everybody. But my experience of going out to the field, talking to the fellow air marshals, having candid conversations, I am truly impressed by the men and women that work for us. They believe in what they do. As we sit here today, we're a week removed from the ceremonies that took place in the country about 9/11. A lot of people remember 9/11 one day a year. We remember it every day of the year. And the men and women really value their responsibility to this organization. But I have to candidly admit to you that we have some people who just feel like the rules don't apply to them and they don't have to abide by the rules. As I said jokingly last night, and I said I wouldn't say this today, but I'm going to, they don't wear T-shirts and they don't confess. You got to find them. So if I tell people what the expectations are, and they're not in their head, there's nothing else to talk about, right? It's time to find another job. And most of the people in this organization, they respect that, and they're looking for us as leaders to do something about this. They don't like being splashed all over the news every other month. So do I think we have a culture problem? No. I just think we have a handful of people who, again, just think no one's looking and they can get away with this stuff. I mean, you heard my remarks about soliciting prostitutes, which again, contributes to the scourge, as I said, of human trafficking. How can a law enforcement officer who really cares about this mission, this department, this organization, engage in an activity? It just baffles the mind. So, it's time for them to find another job, and I'm going to help them do that.
Thank the gentleman. We'll now recognize the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Heiss, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to both our witnesses for your testimony here today. Ms. Book, I'd like to draw some answers from you. Just overall, what is the role of the Office of Professional Responsibility?
Thank you, sir. So the Office of Professional Responsibility was created to handle the law enforcement cases and senior leadership cases. And so it's a centralized office that handles all the cases of misconduct. We don't do the investigations. We have a separate office that handles the investigations, Office of Inspection. So they conduct the investigations, compile a report of investigation and give it to our office. And then my office has proposing and deciding officials that will handle the adjudication of the misconduct.
Okay, at what point do you get involved with an allegation?
Well, we have monthly meetings with the Office of Inspection, also OLE FAM, excuse me, and my office to know that there are ongoing investigations. So I'm aware of the investigation, but I'm not involved in the investigation. So our office isn't involved until the report of investigation is completed and delivered to our office.
So what kind of jurisdiction do you have? If not investigations, what do you do?
So we can take disciplinary action, we can propose, we can do letters of reprimand, letters of counseling, propose suspensions, implement the suspensions, removal actions.
All right, so you have a certain degree of latitude then so far as disciplinary action and that type of thing?
Yes, sir.
Is there a scale to determine what kind of disciplinary action there is based on certain behavior?
Yes. We developed a table of offenses and penalties, and so the table has categories of offenses, and then it has ranges of penalties that are used as a guide for the proposing officials when drafting the proposed removal document.
Okay, so if there is some disciplinary action or corrective action that you take, does the employee have a right to appeal?
Yes, of course. So when our proposing official completes the draft of the, say it's a proposed removal, then the letter is delivered to the employee with all the materials that are relied upon. Then the employee has 7 days to respond, and during that time can request an extension if necessary to obtain counsel. And then they make a reply to the deciding official, who's a different individual, who hasn't seen the case until the same time that the employee received it. And so they have an opportunity to make a written reply and an oral reply.
Okay, so by the time all the written and oral replies, what kind of time frame are we looking at for an appeal process?
It can depend. It depends on if extra time is needed for the employee to coordinate with their attorney. We want to give them that time if necessary. So it can depend. So
It could take a
range.
lengthy time.
It could, but typically it does not.
Okay, how long does it, on your side, how long does it take to recommend disciplinary action?
Well, once we receive the report of investigation, our goal is to, and we've been meeting this goal, is to issue the proposal or the letter of closure within 30 days, calendar days from receipt of the investigation. Okay. And then our deciding official also has a standard too. The target is to issue the decision letter within 21 days following either the oral or the written reply, the last of those two.
Okay, does your disciplinary action include removal of employees? And if so, what is the cost, what's involved in removing someone?
It does. We do have authority to remove the employee, and I'm not understanding the question for the cost.
Yes, just the process, is that a big deal? Does it cost the agency time and money and research investigation? Of course, you don't do all the investigation, but is it a big deal to have someone removed?
Yes, it takes a lot of work. Yes, it does. I have a dedicated staff to do it, so that's why we're able to do it more quickly. So I have a dedicated staff of 30 people.
Do you feel you have the sufficient tools needed to proceed with adequate and sufficient disciplinary action when needed?
I do. Thank you.
Okay. So you would not think from our perspective there is more that should be done. You have everything you need to deal with the issues like what we're talking about today.
Yes, I can't think of anything else that we would need.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. And Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. We'll now recognize Ms. Kelly for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you both for being here. I too want to express, thank you both for being here. I too want to express my concern regarding the allegations reported by ABC, the channel I watch, in Chicago, the city that I represent. But I also want to give you the opportunity, Director Allison, to talk more about the positives. You shared with the chairman about the program dealing with alcohol, but can you talk more about the town hall meetings or the thank you campaign that you're doing? What are some of the good things?
Sure. You know, I really get a lot of enjoyment out of the town hall visits. You know, you walk in the room, and when I was a soldier, it was a big deal when the general showed up. I don't think I'm important, but everybody else seems to. But it's imperative to have those conversations with our workforce to tell them, this is where we are, this is what we're working on, am I looking at the right things, what say you, and give them an opportunity to ask questions. They range anywhere from what's the future of the organization to I heard about this change, I heard about that change, and the longer it goes, inevitably it gets down to personal issues, but that's what I'm there for. It's extremely invaluable because out of that process, what we've learned, or what I learned, was in our effort over the years to really enforce policies and discipline, I think we, it might sound counterintuitive, the word we're talking about today, probably went a little bit too far to the point where we had a culture of writing people up. And what I mean is, you don't want to have a place where your good people are walking on eggshells. And that's kind of where we are. So we just recently rolled that back, and working with Heather and the Office of Human Capital and our council office and the Office of Inspections, we're really delegating a lot of these low-level minor issues back to the management so they can lead like managers should be doing. And then Heather's shop can focus on the more important issues and maybe help speed up the timelines. So that's something that was pretty significant that came out of the town hall meetings. The thank you campaign, I wish I could take credit for it, but my staff did. Our air marshals get involved in a lot of things. I remember Congressman Walker from another hearing told me about his wife being a trauma nurse. Our men and women are all over the place in a lot of airports around the world and around this country. They get involved in things. They help people in car accidents, so a whole host of things like that. The staff combs through the daily reports that come in and pick out issues, and they just send a thank you letter. And it's from me, and it's just saying, we're aware of this incident, thank you. And I forgot the number of letters that went out, but it's quite a few.
And can you share just some of the medical and psychological assistance programs that are available?
Yes, ma'am. So we have to take yearly physicals, so the medical staff pretty much follows up on those issues that come from the physicals. But also, what's really impressive about the medical staff is there's 24/7 on-call medical support. So you can imagine, we go to some pretty nasty countries, and anytime day or night a fellow marshal calls, there is a nurse that is available to them to provide advice and counsel. Just to give you one example, you may have heard of the individual that was assaulted with a needle in Nigeria. Our doctor was on the phone with him in Nigeria at 11 o'clock at night, as I was in my PJs at my desk, walking through what happened, trying to figure out what's the best way to manage that incident. So it's a fabulous resource. They do a tremendous job, and certainly an enabling factor to our success.
Well, I just want to thank you for your leadership, and I'm sure things will continue to get better and better.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Ms. Congressman.
Thank the gentlewoman. We'll now recognize the gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Russell, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Director Allison, with regard to the particular incident, I realize it's under investigation, but could you speak to how it was initially discovered, internally or externally?
Our Office of Inspection was running the initial investigation.
And with that in view for either one of you or both, how many of the most egregious incidents of misconduct have not been discovered by internal audits, inspections, or investigations?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
I guess I'm curious to know, the hallmark of a professional organization is that it discovers its own warts and makes corrections. So how many of these most grievous incidents that you come to testify on have not been discovered by internal audits, investigations, or inspections?
Sir, I'll take that question. I can't give you a specific number. I'm not in the Office of Inspections, but the Office of Inspection does have a hotline. It's a confidential number that can be called by the employees, and they can report allegations of misconduct.
Would you characterize that the vast majority have been discovered internally by your organizations and then it becomes public, or vice versa?
I couldn't speak to that. I'm sorry.
So in this particular instance, this was found by us, and then it became public.
Yeah, and that's really kind of the point I'm trying to make, is that the hallmark of a professional organization, it discovers its own warts. And, you know, Mr. Chairman, with regard to one of our colleagues using the line of reasoning that, you know, the irrelevancy of the Federal Air Marshal Program due to sexual misconduct incidents, I'm mindful of the number of members of Congress over the years that have committed sexual misconduct. One list has over 60. But no one would suggest that maybe we ought to eliminate Congress because of these trysts. And I think it's important to note that. It doesn't mean that we don't have problems. I think you've displayed some professionalism here today in how that you go after these incidents, and that we have to do them because of the secretive nature of some of the work. A lot of the good news stories, intercepts, the incidents of terrorism that never happened will never go reported. And so I just wanted to say thanks, you know, but there is obviously a lot more that can be done. Now, you've detailed some of those things in lack of a better term, establishing a good command climate or a good control of the organization. Alcohol, wine, women, and song has been the bane of law enforcers and soldiers for, what, millennia. What other than these sensing sessions or alcohol intervention programs, what other than that, though, are you doing to directly interface somebody's moral conduct and moral fiber so that when you're not present and they are by themselves, that they'll do the right thing? Could you speak to that?
Sure. As you stated, Mr. Congressman, it comes down to individual accountability, right? That's what it comes to. So as leaders, we have the opportunity to influence people, suggest and coach and mentor them that they will do the right thing. And the good news is the majority of our people do the right thing. I've had town halls where I had people, let me give you an example. I started this job June 1st, which is a Sunday. On Wednesday, I was in the Baltimore field office in 2014, had a town hall, probably 75 people in that room. In August, there was a gentleman who found himself in Des Moines, Iowa on a DUI at 11:30 at night and tried to make his flight the next day. He was in that town hall, sitting right there taking notes for his squad. He's got to go, and he's gone. And so you do your best to try to reach people, convince them to do the right thing. A lot of us do it because of a sense of duty and purpose and pride of the mission. Maybe some people are just here to collect a check. That's fine as long as they're doing the right thing. Yeah, welcome aboard, but you got to do the right thing.
Well, one thing that might be helpful, and you know, with appreciation to the sensitive nature of the work, is the scope and scale to show incidents, vice number of people that are doing the job. I'm going to ask you to speak to those numbers here, but it might be very useful for us to see the scope and scale, and it really, you know, these are either a major percentage or a problem, or maybe they're in isolation and they've been discovered internally by your organization. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. Now recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Desaulniers, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member. Director, first I want to join the positive comments about your management. It's really a relief to hear it, and off of, as the Chairman said in his opening comments about some of the other hearings we've had and the difficulty of what would seem like just common sense management and leadership. So, but I wanted to, besides congratulating you and thanking you, talk about a specific program that you've developed, it's my understanding you developed, that Mr. Russell sort of mentioned, the alcohol awareness campaign. Because you just walk the committee through what was the genesis of you developing the campaign, and sort of what the campaign does for prevention and intervention, and then the testing protocol that would be able to intervene after you've done the prevention and intervention.
Sure. So, Mr. Congressman, I was telling the chairman, the ranking member, that having been in inspection, I saw where a lot of misconduct was associated with what I call Mr. Booze. And so what we wanted to do was give our employees, an opportunity and let them know that if you have a problem, which is very difficult as I come to learn, come forth and we're going to help you. Recognizing that most people don't have a problem, they're just, had one too many. So the idea was to provide an avenue, an educational forum, and everybody had to take it. So now I know either you have a problem, if you don't have a problem, that means you know better, right? So that's the either-or scenario that created. A lot of positive reviews by the workforce. It's very gut-wrenching when you hear these two gentlemen, and I hope they're watching today. Very courageous for them to come forth and tell their story, and both of them almost died. I'd be happy to share with anybody who would like to see it if you so desire. So after that was done, because the positions are designated as critical sensitive, national security critical sensitive positions, we are subjected to random drug and alcohol testing, and it's what we all know that government employees experience. You get called into the office on a particular day, and you have to submit to a urinalysis. So that is ongoing. Because of some of the activity that I saw overseas when I was in inspection, we actually developed an extension of that program based upon our authority, where we actually trained, equipped, and certified TSA employees with the Office of Inspection to just pop up on international destinations at random, and basically they're greeting people, but if you look like you're drunk or smell like you're drunk, you're going to get tested. So it's reasonable suspicion. Not really popular with the workforce, obviously, but as I talk to people and explain what we're trying to do to try to get a handle on these incidents, they understand it. So that's how we orchestrated this whole program, and that's how those processes work together.
Do you think there are lessons learned from your experience that should be shared either with your sister agencies in the federal government or with public safety in general?
I wasn't looking for credit when we did it, but as I shared it with people, they do think it's a valuable tool. Because at the end of the day, as government executives and public servants, as we're doing today, you will be called to ask, what are you doing about it? Right? But if we can help people, if one person comes forward, that's great. And we had a couple people come forward, but as I come to learn, it's very tough.
I appreciate your work. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. Now recognize the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Grothman, for 5 minutes.
Yeah. It's a little disturbing that you have to go through a program to tell people they shouldn't be working while drunk, but I'm glad you're having success with your program. About how many air marshals do we have out there?
Sir, I can't discuss the number of federal marshals in public. I'll be glad to speak to you in private and go into great detail.
Okay. And what do they do during the day? Is their job they're supposed to kind of be the policeman in the air?
Well, pursuant to the Aviation Transportation Security Act that was passed back in 2002 after 9/11, we are responsible for detecting and deterring and defeating criminal acts, which means we are aviation security specialists on U.S. flagged air carriers.
So does that mean basically their job consists of sitting on an airplane and being the policeman?
Their job is to be security, yes, aviation security.
They hang around the airports otherwise, or what is my job if I spend 40 hours a week as an air marshal? What am I doing?
The majority of the time of the air marshals, they're flying. They're actually on flights.
Last year, and I was trying to tell from your budget, make a wild stab at how many people we had working there. I mean, I've never heard on a personal level in the times that I've flown, or anybody else that I've ever talked to has flown, a time when somebody was arrested on an airplane. I'm sure it happens. Last year, how many incidents in which somebody had to be arrested or removed from an airplane did your guys come up with?
I don't know the number, but I would be confident telling you it wasn't that many.
Yeah, that's what I wondered. I wondered whether there were more incidents involving the air marshals or whether the air marshals are detecting more incidents. Could you give a stab at that?
Well, my response, Mr. Congressman, would be we are responsible for providing security on these flights. I'm not so sure the metric of an arrest is a fair metric. I got it. It's an easy one to say how many arrests have you made. I would direct the fact that the Federal Marshal Service, in conjunction with the intelligence community, all those analysts, the analysts at the Terrorist Screening Center, everybody in the Department of Homeland Security who's committed to securing our country and the transportation system, and the fact that we haven't had another attempt like 9/11. We do know that there is an active threat against aviation to this country. There are a number of groups that still want to attack aviation. So I understand when somebody says, how many arrests have you made or how many terrorists have you stopped? I can meet with you in private. I think you would be very surprised, some data that I would show you. But I do understand the question and where it comes from, but I would have to be honest with you, I don't think that's a fair metric.
Okay. Can your guys ever have a drink in an airport?
Drinking on duty is specifically, it's not allowed.
Okay, I mean, can they ever drink in an airport, though?
Are you suggesting on duty?
No, just period. I mean, I suppose you're not supposed to have a drink beforehand either. I just wondered,
No, I mean, we have a rule that there is no drinking 10 hours before a flight.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand your question.
And can you tell me, I guess everything here is secret, are they on all U.S. flag carriers or just carriers that leave the United States or?
Yes, so we have authority to fly only on U.S. flag carriers. There are some 26,000 flights per day. Obviously, we're not on all of those flights. But we also do foreign and domestic flights.
Okay. And does that mean if I'm flying United, I don't know if they do from London to Rome, I might get one of your guys on there? Or does that mean it would have to be a flight coming or going from the United States?
If it's a U.S. air carrier, which I don't know if there's one that goes from London to Rome, but if it's a U.S. air carrier, there could be an air marshal on that flight. So we do some international flights, Tokyo to Thailand and Amsterdam, I think, and another location.
Okay. And are you ever involved in stuff other than on the airplane? I mean, might your guys just be hanging around the airport looking for stuff, or is it basically on an airplane type?
Yes, sir. We manage the Viper program. I don't know if you've heard of that, the Visible Intermodal Prevention and Response. And so there was legislation and appropriation given to the Federal Marshal Service to provide a visible deterrent within the aviation and surface venues. Okay. And you may have seen that at Union Station on the recent holiday with the Secretary.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'll yield the remainder of my time.
Thank the gentleman. Now recognize the ranking member, Mr. Cummings, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Director Allison, let me ask you this. I was listening to you talk about being proactive, and you also talked a little bit earlier about hiring and trying to make sure you hire the right people. And in this committee, we've been dealing with the Secret Service. In my community, we have been dealing with the Baltimore City Police. I think a lot of times when I hire people, I look for two things. I look for smart people and people with passion for the mission. Got to have both. One without the other doesn't work. Because if they've got passion for the mission, if they're smart and got passion for the mission, like you said, there's certain things they're just not going to do. They're not going to do it. In other words, negative things, going against the mission. It's sort of like going against yourself. And I was just, I'm listening to you, and I was thinking, you know, I think people can supervise with a culture of fear or with a culture of inclusiveness and excellence. And it's just like, you know, I sit on the board of the Naval Academy, and there's not a time that I meet with those midshipmen after our board meetings that I am not filled with just phenomenal admiration. You know why? Because they have both. They have a passion for the mission and this country, and they're smart. And so they basically sort of self-govern. That's what, I guess that's what where you're trying to get to. People self-govern because they want to be a part of the elite of the elite. And I was just wondering, I mean, I just kind of throw those concepts out there because I think sometimes we approach things from the back door with, gotcha, gotcha, gotcha. And I think there's a natural inclination, if you are supervising with a gotcha, somebody's going to try to duck and dodge in the process. But if everybody's being lifted up, my theory is the people who are not about the mission are going to fall off because, you know why? The people who are about it aren't going to tolerate it. They're just not going to tolerate it. Or they're going to be, or the person who's not about the mission is going to feel so uncomfortable that it's just not, they know it's not going to work. And I just wanted to, I mean, I've listened to all of what you said, and I was just wondering, how does what I just said, if any of it, fit into your philosophy of supervision? And the reason why it's so important, you know, the chairman is right. I mean, we have folk come in here all the time, and it's almost like they are in supervisory roles, but they seem as if they don't want to admit if there's a problem. And if there is a problem, they don't want to take the appropriate action to address it, with due process, of course. So I was just curious as to you know, your feelings on it.
Sure, Mr. Congressman. You know, leadership philosophy, I comport myself with the philosophy of mission first, people always, right? Those aren't diametrically opposed. And you're right. I think somewhere along the way, and again, I've had some tremendous opportunities working for the government. I attended some wonderful leadership courses, and we all learn and grow as we progress through the federal government, and you get more and more responsibility. So you are right; it is a learning exercise. And specifically to your point, as you were talking, I wrote down something I had heard along the way, which is it's better to be a charismatic leader that inspires performance than a tyrannical one that demands it. And that's where we want to be, because that's when you're going to get the most bang for your buck. As I said to you guys last night, if we can inspire people, coach people, mentor people, instill the mission, we're going to be in a lot better place rather than waiting and being that person that you described that says, you know, I got you. That does not work. We know that does not work. I know that does not work. So we need to be at a place where every person in the organization has pride in the organization, some degree of pride, a lot or little, some degree of pride. And you're not just here to collect a check. And, you know, once we get to that place, that's the place we want to be. You're exactly right.
Now, one of the things that, I mean, how do you feel about the morale in your agency overall?
The morale in the organization?
Yeah, the morale.
The only way I have to gauge that, Mr. Congressman, is through the surveys that come out every year, and they're not good. You know, we had one when I first took over that I had it, and I own it. I'm not making excuses. I'm in charge, so that, you know, that was done before I got there, but I own it. It was very low. So that is challenging. You know, how do you get the morale up? You know, in some respects, morale is an individual decision. We all have an opportunity to come to work every day and decide how we're going to feel. My morale's high. I feel good when I come into work. I'm energized, I'm excited, and I can create the environment for morale, right? I can do things that are fair, that are transparent. We can communicate with our employees. We can let them know that we support them. So that is a challenge, and the department, as you're well aware, has taken on this quite feverishly over the couple of years. So as senior leaders, we're all working on it.
Yeah. Last question, and I ask you and Ms. Book. I want to be real clear. So you all feel that you have the tools that you need. You don't need anything else from us. Is that right? To deal with discipline and things of that nature. Ms. Book?
Thank you. Yes, we have all the tools that we need to deal with the discipline.
Director?
I believe the same as well.
Thank you very much.
Now I recognize the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Walker, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Allison, when did you start? When was your official start date?
June 1st, 2014. It was a Sunday.
Okay, all right, okay. So you're what, 18, 19 months into the job?
Something like that, sir.
Okay. About how many hours a week do you work on this process? You got a hunch, but I wanted to hear from you.
Probably about 11 hours a day.
Okay. Obviously, you do your homework because 3 months ago, you remembered our conversation from the Committee on Homeland Security conversation. I appreciate you doing that. And if I can think back with you, I remember we talked about some of the abuses of the Federal Air Marshal from a financial or fiscal standpoint, some of the first-class flying, and how are we trimming back, and how are we doing it? In those 3 or 4 months, can you just mention, have we made some improvements there?
Sure. I actually went back immediately, and we have an industry engagement organization. They're very aggressive. They have a lot of reach back into the industry, and I proposed that series of questions to them the very next day. And I've actually went back to them a couple times. So we haven't heard anything, which is good news. But at the same time, we made it very clear, if you are aware of abuses, if you are knowledgeable of abuses, report it, and we'll look into it.
But it is kind of tough to acknowledge just because you're not going out in groups. This is kind of an honor system, which is kind of what kind of led us to to this other predicament and situation. So as far as self-reporting, you lead and supervise and direct an environment that's kind of tough when you're out there by yourself. Is that fair?
That is fair, but with respect to the context of the question that you asked, if members of the airline industry believe that there are abuses, they have complete autonomy and freedom to report those incidents to us.
I mean, does that happen? Do they know that? I mean, I mean, is there some kind of protocol that people in the airline industry know who to contact when they see abuses?
There are routine meetings between this industry engagement and the airlines. We actually run a liaison unit within the Federal Marshal Service that has constant dialogue with the airlines.
2 more points I want to make quickly during my time. As we said months ago, we talked about the fiscal problems and how much we're spending. I think Chairman Duncan mentioned close to $1 billion since we've launched this program. So you have from that people very, very well good arguments as far as the concern about that. Now we have one that kind of hits it from another angle, which I'll call behavioral problems. You see where it makes it tough to say this program continues to be legitimized as far as something needed, and I'd like for you to maybe take a minute to respond to that.
Sure, that's a fair observation, but I think an equally fair observation is to acknowledge every organization has misconduct. No organization is immune, no profession. Even the hollowed halls of which we sit here today has seen its share on both sides of the aisle.
Are you sure about that? No, I'm just, yeah.
But I think what you're asking, what the committee is asking, is a fair question. What are you doing about it? The majority of the men and women behave themselves, and they're dedicated employees, and they do a great job. Now, if it got to the point where a huge percentage started involving themselves in this activity, I'd be spending more than 11 hours a day in the office. But that is not the case.
Let me get the one final point now, and I'll yield back the balance of my time. Explain, or if you would, lead me through as far as how often the TSA or the DHS does a comprehensive field study in assessing the threats? Does it vary? Is it seasonal? I mean, is it up and down? Spike? What are you saying, or what are you seeing out there? And help me understand why that's continued to be necessary.
So it's not by season, it's not by quarter, it's daily. So myself and the executive staff at TSA, we sit in intel meetings every morning. And the intelligence professionals at TSA, they're reaching back to the intelligence community, and they're getting that data, and they're providing briefings. And I will offer any member of this committee, and we've done it with other members of Congress, to join us at that morning meeting.
Ms. Book, Director Ellison, I appreciate you being here today, even sitting through a vote. With that, I'll yield back to the Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll recognize myself for the second round here. We do have a vote on the floor, and we will wrap up this hearing rather soon. But I do have a few more questions. Director, the 3 individuals from Chicago, what would you like to see have happen to them?
I am confident that they will be shown the door, and that's what I'd like to see.
Should they be prosecuted?
I would like to see them prosecuted, but the reality of the way the work is done and caseloads, and I'm not privy to say whether they can or not. It would be nice, but that's not reality, right? There's a lot of cases that don't get prosecuted.
And this is one of the challenges. We have an organization, you have a director here who's trying to do the right thing, weed out the bad apples, but if the Department of Justice doesn't get up off their seat and actually prosecute some of these cases, there won't be the full extent of the consequences that I think is important for all the Federal employees to see. Not only to the people who are doing misdeeds to get the sense of justice here that, you better get your act in order or it may happen to you, but also all the good apples to know that there are consequences, that we are looking out for the 90+% of the people who do the job right. They do work hard and show up on time, and they don't drink, and they don't do all those things. But when they all know what's happening, they know when somebody else is messing up, and when nobody's held accountable and there's no accountability and no justice, there's no justice. And it frustrates those employees. What is the disposition of, Ms. Book, what's the disposition of Robert Bray? What's going on with him? He's the former director.
Yes, he's retired.
Did he get prosecuted?
No, he did not.
There's a case that's going on that involves somebody who was reassigning flights so they can meet up with other people for some sexual type of rendezvous. What's the disposition of that case?
That case is still under investigation.
So we have several people involved in that investigation. Have there been any charges levied so far?
As far as I know, it's still under investigation.
Still under investigation, still no charges. And here they have the case of 3 people from in Chicago. The person who retired or resigned, however you want to term it, what's going to happen to that person? Any prosecutions? Director Ellison?
I do not know, sir.
My concern is that he's going to be simply allowed to retire. He'll get his full benefits, all the other benefits, yet he was entrusted with a gun on an airplane to protect 100+ people on any given flight, and for him to just simply walk away is just not right. And you know what, losing a security clearance, I don't know that cuts it. Director?
So I don't know if he was in the organization long enough to receive a retirement or any benefits. Obviously, as federal employees, you accumulate tenure at different increments, and you are entitled to something. But the fact of the matter is anybody can leave when they want to, right? So if you know you're under discipline, you say, I'm resigning, we can't stop people from resigning. Now, if the facts and circumstances lead one to believe that, or we can get a prosecution perhaps, as we know, unemployed people get prosecuted all the time. But we still will drive forward on our personal security process. As a minimum, this person probably won't see federal service anymore, and maybe not even law enforcement, because they're going to come back and call us.
I hope so. I hope they do the calling. second person or the other person who is, was not involved and engaged in the potential disability fraud, what's the disposition of that person? They're still employed by Federal Air Marshals?
Well, so Chicago incident, all 3 individuals indefinitely suspended, 1 individual resigned. So one of the 2 people you're asking about is on indefinite suspension.
With or without pay?
Indefinite suspension is, any type of suspension is without pay. A regular suspension is usually defined by a period of time, 3 days, 7 days, 35 days, 45 days, et cetera. Indefinite suspension has no time limit. So he will sit on indefinite suspension until the conclusion of this investigation.
And do you have discretion to make that decision?
Yes, we do.
Now, this is the disconnect, and I was mentioning this to Ranking Member Cummings. We have had similar situations in other departments and agencies, and some within Homeland Security. We've had the director or the administrator of the EPA, obviously not part of Homeland Security, but we did have the director of the Secret Service here, and we've had the former director, she's now resigned, of administrator of the Drug Enforcement Agency. All 3 of which led us to believe that their hands were essentially tied on revoking of security clearances. I like the fact that you have discretion and you can make this decision and that you can move forward. Can you help me if it could provide any insight? Why is it that you have that ability and you're exercising it as opposed to these others who say, there's nothing I can do?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure, I can't speak for the service or the DEA. I can tell you unequivocally, this is what we do. You know, we abide with strict guidance or strict adherence to the personal security guidelines, and we are lawfully exercising what's our authority to do.
And I think one of the major differences here is leadership. And I'm not saying you got it perfect, and I think it's important we continue to engage with you in oversight, but your openness and willingness to engage in that oversight, your proactive communication with the committee speaks volumes about you and your organization. It is imperative that we figure this out for other departments and agencies, because I do think there's a lack of leadership. It leads to a negative culture, and I think it leads to inaction, and that inaction festers. If you don't dig out the root of the problem, it becomes a bigger infection. And I like the fact that you're addressing this head on. I encourage you to please, please continue to do that. And to the rest of the Federal Government, let's learn from these lessons, root out the waste, fraud, and abuse, applaud and support the good men and women, the overwhelming majority who do it and do it the right way. And with that, I will yield back. We'll recognize the Ranking Member as we go.
Mr. Chairman, I'll be very brief. First of all, Director Allison and Ms. Book, I don't know whether you watch our hearings often.
I've watched every one of them.
You must have an exciting life.
That's a long flight he's on, I tell you.
But rarely are we able to jointly give these kind of compliments, and that's why I say that. But they're meant very sincerely. It's always good to have an example of what should be done, and I think that now that we hear about what you're doing, it helps us. And I know you want to stay in your lane. I got that, but you are presenting an example of the way it should be done. And now, you know, we're going to, I hate to tell you this, but we're going to hold other agencies to the same standard. Because when they come in, we're going to ask, why can't they do these things? But again, thank you. And an interesting thing, too, when I asked, did you need any additional authority? I think what the difference is, other folks actually, you all take the authority that you have and use it. Other folks don't always do that, and I think that's the big difference. With that, I want to thank you all very much. And I want to, by the way, and we really want to thank all of the employees of your agency. We appreciate what they do. A lot of times, you know, my mother used to, when she prayed, she would say, "Thank you, Lord, for protecting me from my seen and unseen dangers." And so when things aren't seen, a lot of times people don't know what your agents are able to avoid. They only hear about the things that go wrong, and then you catch somebody or something like that. But I know there's a lot of unseen things that they also address, and I want to thank all of them on behalf of our grateful Congress. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Well said. Thank you. The committee stands adjourned.